Welcome to this episode of the More People podcast. I'm Richard Hanwell, Managing Director for More People. I'm joined today by our very own CEO, Andy Fitzmaurice. Welcome, Andy.
Hi.
We are talking today about networking, the power of your networking. We make a living out of it. That's what we do. I think looking into the future of recruitment and how the world is likely to change with AI and algorithms and formulas, etc., there's going to be an even bigger pressure to network and relevance around it. Keen to get your thought processes on how you joined recruitment and how that need and style for networking's kind of evolved within your 20 years within the industry.
Yeah, it's a long time. And if that time's taught me anything, it's that the value of networking is not to be underestimated. And there's lots of ways of doing it, right? I mean, everyone will passively network every day by associating with colleagues and having clients and customers that they interact with. So to some degree, your network is always going to expand, whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
How superficial those connections are, or how deep rooted they become, and how much value you can add, or sometimes take away, because it's a two-way street, is down to how well you nurture those relationships. And I think, like all relationships, whether it's one with a partner or a distant friend, if you look after them and you work at them, then they thrive. And if you don't do a good job of doing that, then they die. Or at the very least become superficial,
less relevant,
more difficult to leverage. And I don't mean that in a what's in it for me context.
No,
people know, I think, how the world rubs around with I help you, you help me, and that's one of the great things about network, that it does become about helping one another. There is a mutual benefit to it. But I think if my career today has taught me anything, it's that when it comes to networking, you do have to be proactive, either in the amount of time that you choose to invest in your network. And that might be as simple as how well you know your colleagues. You know, do you know your colleagues' partners' names? Do you know the names of the kids? Do you know what they did at the weekend? The same for your clients.
You have to care.
You have to care
enough to know that.
Oh, people can smell it a mile away if it's really superficial.
It's a box ticking exercise, doesn't work.
And you have to remember the answer, otherwise it becomes really disingenuous. Start at home, start at that base level with the colleagues that you have. You will, as I say, do some of it organically through osmosis with the interactions that you've got at trade shows, if you're taken out to any, or networking dinners if you're fortunate enough to be invited to those. But maybe you also have to seek opportunities to network as well. Now, that might be, we were having a conversation a minute ago about the Links Chamber of Commerce, for example. It's not one that's on our radar, but immediately it's been mentioned, we're going to go and look into it. There's any number of industry networking events that we get involved in every year. And we do have to be selfish with our time and try and manage the value we think we can get from those things, not necessarily in pounds, pence. But our time is expensive and short. So where are you going to spend it? Because when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. So which event are you going to do? And then when you're there, you've got to put yourself out there proactively to make the most of it.
Oh, it's pointless me and you going to the same networking event and walking around with each other.
Yeah, we should go opposite directions, really. But it's a skill, right? And it's one that therefore can be learned. I think people believe there are consummate networkers and then there are introverts that
extroverts,
and I don't think that's quite true. Or obviously it's true that there are people with natural preferences for introversion or extroversion, but it's not true that there are natural networkers and not. We all know that person who's a life and soul who could bounce off the walls. You're one of those people that could network in an empty room. Guy's another one. I can do it, and I think when people watch me doing it, they assume it's like a natural God-given skill.
Very competent.
I've had to work at it. You've got to. I have to. Speaking for myself, I've got to go into those networking events and think, right, networking hat on, and once you do it, it's a lot easier than you think. And the more you do it, the better at it you get, because you get better at the things that you practice.
Well, public speaking. You identified some years ago that you didn't think your public speaking skills were on point. And you generated and engineered a talk at a university, which has now become a thing.
Our podcasting skills are terrible, but stick with us. We'll get better.
We'll
at
get
it.
better, we promise. I think you're right. I think if you look at the biggest networking database out there, LinkedIn, it's great having 5, 6, 7, 8,000 connections. But if you don't talk to those connections, what's the point?
Yeah,
You're just there.
and it might be physically talking, it might be pick up the phone,
posting or whatever.
Yeah, I mean the phone is brilliant, powerful, and in a world of AI and algorithms and ChatGPT and God knows what else, there's still a place for human empathy, sympathy, and dialogue by picking up the phone. That's never going to go away. Ignoring the impersonators that are very scary things, but someone being there to listen and to understand what makes you tick is never going to go away. So the phone's massive when it comes to networking, as is face-to-face stuff.
Yeah, even more so.
But you can network by other means, and we touched upon it in a previous podcast talking about personal brand and marketing and the invisible brand. What's happening, what are people perceiving you to be like, and where your values are, even when you're not conscious about it or you're not even doing anything proactive. But LinkedIn, as a bare minimum, is one of those massively important networking tools. But there's a good way to use it, an authentic way to use it, and then there's the collecting of names and souls, like the number of connections is the metric, which obviously it isn't.
People are better at networking than what they think they are. When people talk about networking, they think about these scary networking events where they turn up and they don't know anyone and they've got these name badges and they walk around. I introduce you to a friend of mine and I walk off to go to the loo for 2 minutes. The second question you're likely to ask said individual after their name is what they do for a living. You're doing it. You're doing it naturally. It's a very natural thing to do. And the power of staying in touch without having to be face to face, whether it be Zoom, whether it be Teams, whether it be emails, what have you. I lived abroad for 5 years and still managed my network back here. I just had a meeting with a third party trainer today who's soon going abroad to meet up with 4 guys who are part of his big management trainee kind of training group, and he's never met them.
When he walked
face to face,
and he walked in here and knew these guys straight away from some other previous network. Just the 6 degrees of separation thing becomes quite real and quite apparent quite quickly when you start to cross-pollinate some of these groups. You will share someone or something in common that then becomes, maybe, if not a point of leverage, it becomes a point of familiarity and a safe space to have that conversation. And I wish I knew who to credit it to, because I can't remember who told me this piece of advice.
Me.
Guys, neither. It was, when it comes to networking, and particularly face to face, and you're in that conference room and everyone's in the same boat. So recognize that everyone's in the same boat. I don't think you have to imagine them all naked. I don't know where that idea comes from. That's insane and far scarier. That was probably Guy. But the idea that you recognize everyone's the same amount uncomfortable. Yeah. So your goal in networking, for someone you don't know, that you barrel into and say, hello, we're supposed to be networking, tell me about you, or whatever the opener is. We're British, so it's probably weather related. But the objective is make the other person feel as comfortable as possible.
Yeah.
And if you do that well, that then will rub off on you, and you will then feel comfortable by association because they're comfortable. And I don't know who gave that piece of advice. It's probably generic or 400 years old or something. But if you try and do it, it's amazing how fast it happens. So I've got no problem meeting someone that, as a recruiter, it's my job to know who they are, and it's my job to know their background. It's not their job to remember me quite in the same way. I've got no problem in reintroducing myself, and I know they're going to be uncomfortable because they can't remember my name.
Yeah.
I've got no problem putting them at ease by giving them that out.
Of course.
Rather than making it really awkward. I've got no problem shaking their hand to say, hey, it's Andrew from MorePeople. And they go, oh, of course. And then it all falls into place. And then I feel really comfortable because they're comfortable. And that works with someone who I think already knows me or who's had an interaction. But it might be a total stranger. If you can put them at ease, they'll settle in and they'll be nice and they'll ask you something. You'll be at ease. And then all of a sudden, networking's not scary.
It's also having that curious nature. When I meet somebody, I'm not judging them, but I'd quite like to know what they do. And I literally don't care if they're a stay-at-home dad, stay-at-home mum, if they're the CEO, whoever it is. I'm curious to see how our circles have interacted, whether it be work, sport, whatever. But if you have that natural curious nature, then it works, and then you will find a common ground.
As we've said before, is a huge positive recruiter trait.
Yeah.
Curiosity, like a 4-year-old child who just keeps asking why about everything. It's a really good trait. But to your point, it doesn't matter whether it's a CEO or a bin man or a kitchen porter. There's still going to be questions I want to ask, which will help the whole conversation. I want to know, you know, when you pick up the bins, everyone runs around. Is that because you want to get home sooner and you're paid for the shift? Is it there's so much work to do? How many times do you empty the bin lorry? And people love talking about themselves. So if you're ever ill at ease in a networking conversation, ask some open questions, you know, the where, what, when, how sort of open questions, and then listen to the responses. It's bound to spur on another question.
And if you're not a natural networker, like you said that you don't claim to be, or I certainly haven't been at times, it's quite cool going into a situation you feel uncomfortable about and then conquering it. And the endorphins and the dopamine you get from that, you feel kind of good about it, as well as being in a room where you're, you know, the age old thing, don't be the cleverest person in the room. When we run our exec dinners, I'm definitely not the cleverest person in the room, but you come away having learned loads from an array of different people.
I think about Fruit Logistica last February. It was the easiest and best one I've had because I've been around longer than I ever had before. And I had 3 colleagues with me who I think were all first timers to Fruit Logistica this time.
Yeah.
And I walked around and I knew more faces and names than ever before. So I could wave at people, we could ring me later, I could go on stands and shake hands, and they knew who I was. And in that one interaction, they go, wow, this is amazing. You know everyone. It's like, I don't know everyone.
Yeah.
I know a nano% of the people in here. You're just counting the interactions that I am having. But it is easier because there's years of effort that's gone into it. It'll be easier next year. But if they invest the time in network, online events, networking dinners, I mean, our industry dinners are really good and well worth making a fixture for everybody. Universities, you do all that graft. And then, of course, when you put it to the test year on year at somewhere like Fruit Logistica in Berlin, a massive fruit trade show, you're bound to know more people. But you don't complete it overnight. And I've nowhere near completed it now. It's still scratching the surface. So you keep grafting at it, and like I said earlier, anything you graft at, you get better at.
I remember being at an exec dinner last year and somebody brought up a post that you'd put on LinkedIn from memory. It's about your daughter trading Prime bottles at school.
Yep.
We had no idea that individual had seen it, but you'd put the effort into putting on.
But I think that's also the true test. It's not what you know about your clients, it's about what they know about you.
Yeah,
so
that's a great point.
The second that someone bumps into you and they want to talk about Hong Kong before you even said anything, because that's their reference point, or they want to talk about 4 kids because they've remembered that about you, you know you've not completed it, but you've got there. If I've got a client asking me about golf or talking about my never-ending house extension or whatever it is, the daughter selling Prime bottles, if they're talking to you about your stuff before you were letting slip all your stalker secrets, then you know you mean something.
Yeah, it's a really good judgment of it, really, isn't it? And it has to be authentically you, of course. But in that one scenario, I remember both of us sitting there going, I don't remember that individual interacting with that post, but they don't have to.
Yeah.
It's fine. They know something about you, and from memory, it was a hugely positive conversation around it. But I think as the recruitment industry continues to evolve and change and move forward, as it has for the full 19 years I've been in it, and people often ask me questions about, you know, you worried about AI, you worried about that? Not really. It just pushes more of an emphasis onto the networking side of things, which I think we're pretty good at anyway. But if it means that I can justify spending more time doing it, then great. Recruiters that are out there generating candidates solely off the internet, in my opinion, will unfortunately decline at a rate of knots in the coming years. For those individuals out there generating talent through the power of being themselves, putting stuff out there, meeting people, engineering opportunities to meet new people and more people, they're the ones that will really thrive in what I believe to be the future of recruitment.